Welcome to the Philanthropy Masterminds podcast, brought to you by DonorSearch, the show that takes you inside the lives of thought leaders in fundraising and philanthropy. I'm your host, Jay Frost. Lisa Wolf is a self-described accidental fundraiser whose work has taken her from major political campaigns to advancing the work of Cure International and now fueling the work of nonprofits around the country through Westfall Gold. At the heart of it all has been a focus on building successful relationships. In our conversation, she shares details on the importance of identifying and connecting with donors, helping them to understand the case, building a community of support, and her personal reflections on the concept of generosity. Tell me about yourself.
Tell you about myself. Gosh, that's broad, right? You think about, I am one of those accidental fundraisers, like probably so many of us are. Thought that back in college I was going to have this big career in marketing. And then I stopped and thought about it a couple years ago and thought, well, I'm actually doing what I thought I might be doing, just in a different way, right? Trying to get donors to commit to a particular cause. So I could be, getting people to buy chocolate, or I could be getting them to invest in, transforming lives of people around the world. And so I actually am doing what I thought I would do, just not in the way that I'm doing it. But I grew up in a family that believed it was important to give back, and I think that just propelled me into this world of fundraising when I learned about it in college. I didn't really know it was something that you could go do full time, and so got hired by the annual fund office, and as my job during college, and really loved it. So
Where was this? Where were you going to school?
I went to Muhlenberg College in Allentown.
Yeah. Are you from Pennsylvania?
I am.
Whereabouts?
Yes, I live in central Pennsylvania, just outside Harrisburg.
Oh, then and now? Are you there? Are you in Pennsylvania still? Or?
I still am in Pennsylvania. Have not left Pennsylvania yet. No, I grew up just about an hour from Harrisburg.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, deep roots in Pennsylvania are not uncommon. It's people care about that place. Yeah. So you went to Muhlenberg, but the town you grew up in, what was that like? You talked about developing that sense about, I guess, giving back or being involved in the community. Where did that come from? What were your parents involved in that gave you that sense?
Yeah, well, I grew up in a really small town called Hamburg, which Cabela's later put on the map by putting one of their big stores there, and that prompted a lot of growth in Hamburg. But my parents owned a hardware store with my aunt and uncle, and so they were deeply engaged in the community, the Main Street community in Hamburg. And there was always, I don't know that it wasn't ever spoken, like you must go and do this, but it was modeled. And so they were very engaged in the community, and sitting with various organizations or being engaged with local government and things like that. So I think from just them modeling that to me, I just always believed that was a really good thing that you should do. Give back to your community.
Do you remember some of the earliest activities that they kind of wrangled you, and I don't know if you have siblings, but others in the family into to be involved in things, whether it's a community organization or what have you?
Yeah. Well, I think not so much growing up, like getting involved in projects, but one of the things that I always remember is just my dad coming home from some of the local government meetings that he would be involved in, and just listening to his stories about whether it was growth happening here or what was going to happen to Main Street, and really hearing how he would be engaged and involved and the impact that it had. So I also had a diversion into politics, did political fundraising for Tom Ridge, who was running for governor at the time, and then became the first Homeland Security Secretary. And So I think, that memory stands out in my mind, that civic involvement. And then I think that probably prompted me to get involved in politics. And of course, then I gravitated toward fundraising in politics. And so, it's been an interesting journey.
That the difference between political fundraising and nonprofit fundraising, some of those seem pretty profound. Others are not. But so what was that like for you to go from one to the other? And what are the biggest differences that you've seen?
Yeah. So,
and similarities.
Right. Well, so, what I do now, what we do at Westfall Gold is really all about helping organizations identify their major donors and building a sense of community among donors. And one of the biggest differences from my days in political fundraising is I kind of called it hit and run major donor development because there is no time to cultivate a relationship. You meet someone and, at the meeting you're asking them for, at the time, a $25,000 or $50,000 contribution. And
Drive by asking.
Mm-hmm. There you go. Hit and run, drive by. Yep.
But does it have to be that way? I just have to ask you. I mean, I know it is, but does it have to be?
I think the nature of the political campaign cycle, it does, because you have a self-imposed, you have a deadline.
Right.
The election's going to happen. You have all the work that you need to do to reach voters, mm-hmm. and you also have quarterly filings that you have to demonstrate that you are leading because you have the most money in the bank. So there's a lot of pressure.
I'm laughing because I think all of us receive these email from political campaigns, right, from both sides of the aisle, and especially around the end of the quarter, where they say, "Can you please give because it's the end of the quarter?" And if we did that in the nonprofit world, which you know so well, I think people would say, well, I'm not interested in which quarter it is for you. I'm interested in the work and the front. Exactly. So that's one of the things that must be an interesting transition for you, even though you've been doing this kind of work for a long time. Yeah. So how have you navigated kind of that road too? Because it worked very well, obviously, for Governor Ridge and for others.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I do think that in political fundraising, you're building a core group of supporters, and whether it's the governor's circle or the, on a presidential campaign, whatever society it might be. So you are working to cultivate a group of donors that can help you all the way through
with some kind of loyalty.
With some kind of loyalty, and then you also are looking to find those people who can help you on the policy side and forming the committees that will help inform your stances on the issues and things like that. So, it's still relational in nature, which is really what we're all doing in serving the nonprofit, especially in the major donor space. It's all about relationships and how they get formed. So I think because I was focused on my political fundraising on mostly major donor efforts, we did direct mail, and we had lots of smaller events. But for the most part, the work I did was all event-based major donor, which is really interesting because that's what I do today. So, I look back on that time, and I've always done events. Now we do them very differently at Westfall Gold today. But that was my early background in the political world anyway, doing event fundraising.
Well, and I do want to talk about other things about your work, but I do think it would be, even though we don't usually talk about products and services here, there will certainly be people who aren't aware of how Westfall Gold does the work it does. So would you mind giving us kind of a 30-second sketch about this event stuff? Because it's not your typical event. This is a very different sort of animal. It
is really different, and it is. So our focus is working with a nonprofit to help them identify their highest capacity donors that are not giving at their potential. So that starts with a wealth analytics process, and we partner with DonorSearch on that. And it goes from there. So then from there, we're creating a weekend experience that they can bring their donors to and really help it. The biggest part of this is, yes, there's an ask that goes along with this, and we have, tremendous return on the investment that the nonprofit makes. But even bigger than that, what we're really doing is helping the donor understand the case. So creating that case for support. We are connecting the donor and building the trust they have with that organization, and then building a community of donors. And so those three pieces are really critical in what happens over the weekend to drive a donor, as we talk about, from giving a transactional gift to a transformational gift, where they're investing in the vision of the organization and having a lot of fun over a 3-day period, hearing from great speakers and hearing great music and enjoying the experience.
From an outsider's perspective, it sounds sort of like a customized TED event for a cohort of people who may not know one another but all care about the same stuff.
Exactly.
And that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Paul Edwards is a friend who works in this sector, talks about it a lot, about how people have been able to raise millions of dollars in a single weekend, sometimes probably in excess of that. I'm probably understating.
Yes, yeah. So I think our average right now is $4.5 million a weekend, which means, of course, in the world of averages, you have some that aren't hitting that, and then some that are hitting 16, 17, $18 million in a weekend, which is incredibly exciting when you see a group of people come together and deeply invest in an organization to help them transform the lives of people that they're working with. Right, and that's one thing, is that I know events can be sometimes transactional in nature, but if people have a chance to bond a little bit, and they feel like they're coming behind either a big project or a new initiative or major endowment or something of that nature, and then they see one another engaging with it and they're engaging with speakers, I would think that would allow them to feel a little less like there was an extraction going on, but rather they were making an investment in something and they were at the beginning stages. It's sort of like a group of early stage angel investors or something. Well, and I think what's really interesting too is, and not just, we certainly talk about it in moving the donor from that transactional gift to the transformational gift, but that's when we, regardless of doing an event, I think our philosophy really is that when you can bond with the donor and you can bring them into community with each other and you can help them deeply understand the case for support, you then earn the right to ask them for a gift that's going toward the vision, and you can raise unrestricted dollars that way. I think in our world of fundraising, we get so focused on putting a project in front of a donor and saying, Mr. Donor or Mrs. Donor, can you do this for us? Right. How about going to them and saying, we know you care about this particular cause. Let us share with you how we are addressing this particular issue. Would you like to join us in making something beautiful happen in the world?
Yes,
and
together.
It's a very different message than putting a proposal in front of somebody and asking them to fund a very specific item or initiative.
Right. You still have to get people together in the same room, and
yes,
that must have been challenging over this last little bit. But this isn't the one and only time we'll have trouble getting people together, whether there's a terrible weather event or another potential health crisis. There are reasons why people don't gather. So how have you, both institutionally and personally, thought about ways to make sure that people can engage with one another in that kind of symbiotic way, even if we're sometimes prevented from all pulling up in the same parking lot?
Right, yeah. Well, needless to say, this last 15, 16 months has been super challenging for us to get people together. But actually, I say that, and that's not really true. We've held events starting in the fall and in the spring, and people have wanted to gather, and we've been able to do that safely. Mm-hmm. But I think what we also learned is that when you have a group of donors who are committed to your cause, that you have either through one of the events that we do, or you've done the cultivation with them, that they were accepting of getting together virtually and understanding that they are part of a bigger community. So even with our clients that had in-person events and we had an extra offered a virtual event, we we were doing as much as we could to try to help them say, even if you're sitting in your house by yourself, you are part of a bigger community. So we sent them an experience package so they could enjoy, while they were watching the virtual event, or really help them understand what was happening on site so that they could be a part of that, because that community aspect is so hard to replicate when you actually can't be in community together. But people want that. They were really, we've all gone through that.
There's a hunger for contact.
There's a hunger to be together. Yeah.
Well, so now on the personal front,
yeah.
Is this one of your first trips? I mean, how long have you been traveling throughout, or no?
I didn't travel in the fall, although we did events in the fall. But I have a family member with a chronic illness, and so I said, this is not something that I want to do right now, because I didn't want to risk having to bring something home to my daughter. But I started traveling in the early spring, and haven't been on the road as much as I normally would be, but that first time was scary, to be sure, because it's like, I have to actually get on a plane load of people.
Well, there's that dimension when there's also, it's just different. I mean,
it's very different.
If people haven't been physically around one another, even if there's a desire to, take it out of fundraising, to just be together with family or whomever, or friends, it's just, how do we navigate the first handshake or hug? And that's different. It must be especially challenging if it's your daughter who has to be especially careful, not only you, but your daughter. What has that been like for your family? And not just as you go out and come back, but for them to be probably at home and then have to re-navigate their entry into the world in an uncertain time.
Yeah, there's a lot of fear that goes along with that. And so it's trying to sort through what's real, what do we really need to be concerned about, and how can we do things safely. The really wonderful thing, I think, coming out of all of this is that people now are asking, are you comfortable with this? How can we make you comfortable? Yeah. As opposed to the way we all just assumed, like, this illness didn't just happen during the pandemic, right? This has been going on, right? So, but now people are so much more aware of how do you handle these situations? How do you make sure that everybody is comfortable? How do you make sure that whatever you're doing is accessible to everybody?
Wow, such a great point.
Yeah, so I hope that never goes away. I hope that we really all still carry with us that feeling of that not everybody always feels as comfortable in certain situations, and that we need to make sure that we're taking care of everybody in the community, whether it's because of a health issue or just for whatever particular reason.
Yes, in fact, one of the reasons I mentioned the handshake and hug is because some of us are huggers and some of us are not.
Yes.
I grew up in Connecticut, so I'm on the more reserved side, I guess I would say.
Yes.
But I try to adapt, because that's what we do in our field. We adapt. But I'm so interested to hear you say that, because as people talk about fundraising and then thinking forward, having learned, hopefully, some of what we've experienced, one of those parts of adaptation or evolution is inclusivity, meaning also accessibility. And you just talked about it in a way with packages that can go to people. So maybe it's because of a health reason, or because of a travel restriction, or geography, or whatever it is. They can't be there, don't want to be there. But it might also be other things. And in the physical events, I think for a long time people have kind of brushed under the rug, not with your events, but just events in our field, gender dynamics too. And I mentioned hugging for that reason. Not everybody wants to go up and just put a big kiss on the cheek for everybody else. So is this a chance for us to reevaluate how we relate to one another, not only for our own benefit, but for the benefit of these organizations we care about?
I think so. I've seen that just in my own personal interactions and at our events too. But yeah, just speaking personally, I do think that having the experience, the dynamic that we have in our family, it has helped us to be able to say, this is what we need to be comfortable. And so I think people now are saying, like, I have a friend who's a hugger, right? And so she used to go in for the hug every single time, right? And now she stops and she's like, would it be okay if I give you a hug? And then people feel like it's okay to say yes or no.
Right.
And
That's
so we're
different,
giving people permission. Yeah.
This is really interesting because, we talk about permission-based fundraising as if it's just a part of filling out forms online, but it's deeper and richer than that. Especially because it's everything. It's about how we define ourselves. I just saw something on a forum recently where someone was listing not just Mr. and Mrs. and Ms., but Miss. And a few of us were looking at that and thinking, when was this form designed? Not because some people don't refer to themselves in that way, but it did seem a little anachronistic. But then again, I guess in theory, if you leave enough space, people can define themselves, they can define their physical space, they can define how they want to be involved with an organization. But this must all be stuff that you've been dealing with professionally for a long time, because in the political realm and the nonprofit fundraising realm, all those things are ones we often, at least I don't get the sense that we were talking about much, but it sounds like you're dealing with them every day. You bring a bunch of people together who are theoretically a cohort.
Right.
Well, that doesn't mean that they all relate to one another the same way. So how have you been within the Westfall Gold context ensured that not only things have worked well, because they have for your clients, but as you think forward, what are the ways that you're trying to introduce some of these other concepts? And maybe the organizations you're working with haven't themselves thought through entirely.
Yeah, and I don't know that they have, and so then we can bring those things to the table and say, how do we set up this particular event? And right now, all of it has really been around safety issues and health, health concerns, and I think that's been the predominant conversation that we've had
for good
at this
reason.
point, and tried to say, just be careful, just understand that not everybody's at the same place. But I think there's an opportunity to carry that forward into just some other areas of this permission, like we're talking about, and people just really everybody being aware of different comfort levels and different behaviors.
Yeah. What's the most fun part of this work for you?
Oh my gosh, it's all fun. Honestly, it is.
I wish I heard that from everybody.
I love what I do. Even the data analytics side of it, which actually I am kind of surprisingly a data nerd in a way. But I guess there's just nothing better than extending that opportunity to a group of individuals that certainly have capacity to make a difference for an organization, and then seeing them understand the vision for the organization and coming together and then saying, I'm all in, and here's my contribution, here's my my commitment to this organization, and do with it where you use it where it's most needed, as opposed to a restricted gift. But the most fun part of my job is on Saturday night, when we get to open all the participation envelopes and we get to tell the organization, hey, your group of 40 or 50 couples that have come together have committed $4, $5, $10, $20 million to your organization. Like, there's nothing better than being able to tell the president how much money we just raised. It's
that must
really
be an amazing celebration at the event too, because I'm sure
is.
You're telegraphing a lot of that to the crowd.
Oh, we are. Yes. Yeah. So yeah, it's fun. How
is this then? I mean, you're having so much fun at work. How do you have fun at home?
I'm not home a lot, but no.
Well, when you're home, are you having big parties with the family too, or are you pretty much tuckered out from the professional
I kind of
parties?
wear my family out because I'm in the right job. I love to be with people, whether it's having another couple over for dinner or it's, going, we've just been doing some kayaking lately, which has been super fun.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm not much for just kind of stay at home and
sure.
be on the, keep it on the low side. I'm always wanting to get together with people. And so I just been recently doing some executive coaching, and my coach was asking me to come up with my values. And surprisingly, one of my values is, one is generosity. Another one is community and being together with people. So yeah, I need to have people over for dinner, and I wear my family out. They're like, do we have to do this again? Like, of course we do. It's so much fun.
Okay, now you just mentioned a word that's really special because people define it so many ways. So if you don't mind, what do you mean when you say generosity, and what form does it take for you in your life?
That's a great question. I mean, most people are going to think about giving of their giving money. For me, it's about living a generous life, and I define that as whether that's helping a friend who's just in need of some extra support, being available to people, being generous with your time. And lately I've been really looking at what does it mean to be a generous leader. And I'm fascinated with the concept of generosity and how it plays out and what it does in your life when you're the giver or when you're receiving it. And so it's something that I really am passionate about exploring and want to delve into more. And so yeah, I think it's all just give what you can. It doesn't mean your money. It could just be your time. It can be how you interact with people. So I have a pretty broad definition of what generosity means.
Right. And I imagine that even though you seem very calm, that you must be impatient for progress, for success, for things to happen. And people I've known who have been involved in events anyway have been both extremely disciplined and also somewhat patient beneath the veneer of calm. So if any of that holds true for you, I wonder, are you as impatient about us moving the needle on generosity as you are with making that event happen and bringing in the money?
Well, I think you hit it. A lot of people do comment on my calm exterior, and I do bring a calm to what I do.
I'm sure we're all grateful for that.
Yes, it's kind of important when you have the person behind the scenes to be calm when there's something crazy going on. So, I do think that I am, but there's so much that could be done. And I know this kind of sounds Pollyannish probably, but it's just there's a lot of need in the world. And there's a lot of people who have in this case, the financial resources to make something great happen. And so unlocking that generosity, yeah, we need to keep going, and we need to do it faster, and we need to be able to match the people with the resources with the people that have the need. And that's why I love being part of this and doing what I do, because it's fun to see it when it happens. And yeah, I wish it would happen quicker, and I wish the world were instantly a better place, but I guess that's why we all do what we do, because we have a chance to be a part of it.
The Philanthropy Masterminds podcast is underwritten by DonorSearch, the world leader in donor intelligence solutions. Our producer is Jack Frost. Our theme music is Be My Remedy, composed and performed by House of Say. You can subscribe to the Philanthropy Masterminds podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can find blogs, webcasts, and CFRE accredited webinars with our featured masterminds at DonorSearch.net, or check the show notes and descriptions.